She entered a cafe with her daughter, 4 years after divorce. Unaware her cold ex-Mafia boss still loved her. 4 years after signing the divorce, Jane walks into a cafe with her daughter in her arms, believing she is finally a free woman. What she doesn't know is that her ex-husband, the dangerous Capo Mike Moretti, never truly let her go. He watched her from the shadows, protected her steps, and kept enemies at bay. But what was distant surveillance turns into an explosive confrontation when he discovers that the woman he still calls wife hid a daughter from him. The war outside is dangerous, but the storm within that reunion might be even greater. Hit that like button right now if you love protective protagonists who would burn the world down for their family. Subscribe so you don't miss a single chapter of this saga. The rain in Seattle didn't wash the sidewalks. It merely darkened them. It was a fine, icy, insistent drizzle that clung to the windows of the Golden Bean Cafe like a liquid curtain, isolating everyone inside from the rest of the world. For most people, that weather was just an inconvenience. For Jane, it was a hiding place. Jane held the thick porcelain cup with both hands, seeking in the ceramic's heat something to warm the perpetual cold that had inhabited her bones for 4 years. Her fingers, pale and slender, traced the rim of the cup in a nervous, almost hypnotic rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. You are safe. The mantra was a lie. She knew it. Safety was an illusion, a thin layer of ice over a deep, dark lake. Mommy, look. The cookie has a bare face. Julia's crystalline voice broke the trance. Jane blinked, the world coming back into focus. The 3-year-old girl was sitting in the high chair across from her, swinging little legs that didn't reach the floor. Julia had chocolate crumbs in the corner of her mouth and a sparkle in her eyes that was painfully familiar. Is it a very dangerous bear? Jane asked, forcing a soft smile, the kind she used to mask constant fear. She reached out and wiped the chocolate from her daughter's face with her thumb, feeling the soft, warm skin. The only pure thing left from a love that had destroyed her. No, he's a nice bear. He lives in the sugar forest. Jane laughed, a low, raspy sound. The sugar forest, she murmured, her eyes darting to the cafe door. Always to the door. It was a nervous tic she couldn't shake, even after 4 years. Even with a changed last name, hair dyed a darker shade of brown, and living in a neighborhood where police sirens were rare. She always expected the past to walk through that door. But the past, she told herself, was dead. Signed on letterhead paper, sealed with the cruelty of words that still echoed in her nightmares. You are weak, Jane. I need a queen, not an anchor. Leave and don't look back, or I will destroy the little that is left of you myself. The memory of Make's voice made her stomach churn. The man she had loved with almost religious devotion had turned into a monster the last night they saw each other. She didn't know about the war. She didn't know about the threats. She only knew the cold rejection, the icy stare, and the hurried signature on the divorce papers. The doorbell chimed. It wasn't a normal ring. The sound seemed louder, sharper, cutting through the soft hum of conversations and the espresso machine. The air in the cafe shifted instantly. The atmospheric pressure dropped, as if an electrical storm had just materialized inside the room. Jane felt it before she saw him. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. An electrical discharge ran down her spine, locking every muscle in her body. The smell of coffee and rain was suddenly invaded by something denser. A fragrance of expensive wood, stale tobacco, and danger. Her heart stopped for a second, skipping a beat, before restarting in a frantic, painful rhythm, hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. It can't be. Not here. Not now. Slowly, as if trapped in a nightmare where the body refuses to obey the mind, Jane looked up. And there he was. Make wasn't just standing in the entrance, he dominated it. He filled the space with a presence that sucked the light from around him. 4 years hadn't softened him. Time had sculpted him into something even more terrible and magnificent. He looked bigger than she remembered. his broad shoulders stretching the impeccable fabric of a custom-made black overcoat. The rain glistened on the coat's shoulders like black diamonds. He didn't look at the counter. He didn't look at the empty tables. His eyes, those stormy gray eyes that Jane saw every time she looked at her own daughter, found hers with the precision of a sniper. Jane's world stopped. The sound of the cafe vanished. Julia's laughter, the clinking of cups, the noise of the rain. Everything was sucked into a vacuum. There was only him, and the gravity he exerted on her. He didn't look surprised. There was no shock on his face, only a dark, predatory satisfaction. He wasn't there by accident. The realization hit Jane like a physical punch. He came to get me. Make took the first step. The sound of his heavy boots on the wooden floor echoed, a sound of absolute authority. People around them instinctively lowered their voices, averted their eyes. That is what alpha predators do. They demand submission without speaking a word. Jane wanted to run. Her brain screamed, "Run!" But her legs were lead. She was frozen, trapped in that gaze that promised to devour her whole. He walked to her table. Slowly, deliberately, savoring the moment. When he stopped beside the table, his shadow covered Jane and Julia, blocking the weak afternoon light. He was a tower of darkness and power. Jane trembled. She couldn't help it. The cup clattered on the saucer when she let go, the sound betraying her terror. "Make." The name came out as a broken sigh, a fragment of a prayer. He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her. His eyes swept over her face, cataloging every detail, every change, every sign of fear. It was a look of possession. A look that said, "Did you think you could hide from me? Hello, Mia Moley, my wife." His voice was velvet wrapped in barbed wire. Low, raspy, vibrating in Jane's chest and awakening memories she had fought so hard to bury. "Ex-wife," Jane corrected, her voice shaking, but trying to find some shred of dignity. "We divorced, Make, 4 years ago." A slow, dangerous smile curved the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of someone who knows a secret that can destroy the world. "Papers are just papers, Jane. You vowed before God. And what is mine?" He leaned in slightly, invading her personal space, his scent wrapping around her, intoxicating her, paralyzing her. "Remains mine. The war is over. I came to take what belongs to me home." Panic rose in Jane's throat, acidic and hot. War? What war? But before she could process, before she could scream for help, as if anyone could stop Make, something happened that made her blood truly run cold. Julia, the girl who had been busy with her cookie, finally noticed the giant presence beside the table. She lifted her head. Her dark curls bounced, and Julia looked up, straight at the man looming over them. Time, which was already slow, froze completely. Jane saw the exact moment Make looked at the child. She saw the arrogance on his face falter. For the first time in 4 years, Make's iron mask cracked. He looked at Julia. And Julia, with the fearless innocence that only children possess, looked back. It was like looking into a mirror. The same gray eyes, the same shape of the chin, the same intensity in the gaze. Even on such a small face, biology didn't lie. It screamed. Make froze. His breathing, previously controlled, hitched. His hand, gloved in black leather, which had been moving toward Jane's face, stopped in midair. He looked from the child to Jane, and then back to the child. The silence at the table was deafening. Jane felt tears burning her eyes. She tried to cover Julia instinctively, a futile gesture of protection. "She's not," Jane began, the lie dying on her lips before it was even born. There was no way to lie. The truth was stamped on Julia's genetics. Make didn't hear. He seemed to have gone into a trance. Slowly, as if approaching a bomb or a sacred relic, he lowered his hand to the level of Julia's chair. He removed his glove. His hand was large, marked by old scars, strong enough to break bones with a squeeze. But when he extended his index finger toward the girl, the gesture trembled, a vibration imperceptible to anyone but Jane. Julia, curious and with no fear of the darkness that man carried, reached out her chubby little hand and grasped Make's index finger. His hand engulfed hers. The contact was electric. Make exhaled sharply, forcing the air from his lungs as if he had been punched in the solar plexus. He looked at Jane, and the fire in his eyes changed. The cold possessiveness vanished, replaced by something much more volatile, much more terrifying and intense, a fury mixed with absolute awe. "How old?" His voice was a low, terrible growl. Jane swallowed hard, feeling like she was on the edge of a cliff. "3," she whispered. "She is 3 years old." Make closed his eyes for a brief moment, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. He was doing the math. He was realizing everything he had lost. Every first step, every word, every night of fever. He had lost everything because he sent her away. But he didn't know she existed. When he opened his eyes again, they were no longer gray. They were black, dilated by adrenaline and raw emotion Jane couldn't name. He didn't scream. He didn't flip the table. His reaction was much scarier. He straightened up, returning to being the unshakable tower of power. He buttoned his coat calmly, but his eyes never left Jane's. "Get her things," he ordered. The voice allowed no reply. It wasn't a question. It was a royal decree. "Make, you can't just..." Jane tried to protest, panic giving way to desperate defense. "I have a life here. You can't show up after 4 years and..." He leaned over the table again, hands splayed on the wood, cornering her. His face was inches from hers. She could feel the heat radiating from him, mixed with the cold smell of rain. "I didn't know I had a daughter, Jane," he hissed, every word dripping with danger and pain. "You stole 4 years from me. 4 years where I protected you from the shadows while you hid my own flesh and blood." He looked at Julia, who was still holding his finger, and his expression softened for a millisecond before hardening again toward Jane. "The discussion is over. The exile is over." He pulled away and held out his hand to her, waiting. "We are going home. Now. And if you try to run, remember that I own this city now. There is no place you can hide where I won't find you." Jane looked at the outstretched hand. The hand of the man who broke her heart to save her, though she didn't know it. The hand of her daughter's father. She looked outside. Black cars were pulling up in front of the cafe. Men in suits were getting out, forming a perimeter. She was surrounded. But looking into Make's eyes, she saw something beyond the threat. She saw a desperate hunger, a loneliness that mirrored her own. With trembling hands, she began to gather Julia's teddy bear backpack. Make didn't smile victoriously. He just nodded, picked Julia up with frightening naturalness, as if he had been born to hold her, and looked at Jane. "Let's go, wife." He said the word like a promise and a sentence. "We have a lot to talk about." And as he walked toward the exit, carrying Jane's entire world in his arms, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The quiet life in the cafe was over. The storm had found her. And God help her, a traitorous part of her heart was relieved not to have to face the cold alone anymore. The walk from the cafe door to the curb was less than 20 steps, yet for Jane, it felt like crossing a border between 2 warring nations. The rain had intensified, drumming a chaotic rhythm against the asphalt, but not a single drop touched her. Before she could even step into the downpour, a wall of black umbrellas opened in unison. Snap, snap, snap. The sound was precise, military. Make didn't carry an umbrella. He didn't need to. A silent shadow of a man walked beside him, ensuring the boss remained impeccable, while Make focused entirely on the bundle in his arms. Jane walked a step behind, clutching the straps of Julia's backpack until her knuckles turned white. She watched him. The way he held Julia, high against his chest, one large hand splayed protectively over her small back, was infuriatingly natural. It was an image she had dreamed of 1,000 times, and then forced herself to forget. A sleek armored SUV waited at the curb, its engine purring like a dormant beast. A driver held the back door open. Mike slid inside, taking Julia with him, and Jane followed, drawn into the vehicle's orbit by a gravitational pull she couldn't resist. The door shut with a heavy, pressurized thud. The sound of the world, the rain, the traffic, the sirens, vanished instantly. Inside, the air was still, scented with conditioned leather and that specific spicy cologne Make had worn since he was 20. The confined space. The interior of the car was a sanctuary, or perhaps a cell. The windows were tinted so dark that afternoon turned into twilight. A privacy partition separated them from the driver, sealing them in a capsule of silence. Julia, usually shy with strangers, seemed mesmerized by the ambient lights on the car ceiling. "It looks like a spaceship," she whispered, her tiny finger pointing up. "It is a spaceship," Make replied. His voice, which had been steel and ice just moments ago with Jane, dropped an octave. It became soft, a rumble in his chest that Jane could feel vibrating through the leather seat. "And it's taking us to a castle." Jane felt a lump form in her throat. She pressed herself against the door, trying to put as much distance as possible between her thigh and his. It was a useless effort. The car was spacious, but Make's presence consumed all the oxygen. "Where are you taking us, Make?" Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking in her lap. She clasped them together to hide the tremor. He didn't look at her immediately. He was busy adjusting Julia's seatbelt, his movements precise and overly careful, as if he were handling a rare diamond. Only when the buckle clicked did he turn his head slowly toward Jane. In the dim light, the sharp angles of his face looked like a landscape of shadows. "To the estate," he said simply. "My apartment in the city isn't suitable for a child." "I'm not going back there," Jane snapped, a spark of her old fire returning. "I have a job, I have a lease, I have a life that doesn't involve bodyguards and armored glass." Make shifted. The leather creaked, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet. He extended his arm along the back of the seat, his fingers inches from her shoulder, not touching, but boxing her in. "You have a life because I allowed it," he said, his tone devoid of arrogance, stating it as a cold fact. "Do you think you stayed hidden for 4 years because you were clever, Jane? Do you think the Bratva, the cartels, the triads, do you think they just forgot about my wife?" Jane froze. The air in her lungs turned into glass. "What are you talking about?" "I bought your safety with blood," Make murmured, his eyes locking onto hers, intense and unblinking. "Every time a name popped up on a list, every time someone asked about the runaway wife, I silenced them. I spent 4 years fighting a war to clear the board, to make the world safe enough for you to exist without me." He leaned in closer. Jane could see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the subtle gray hairs at his temples that weren't there 4 years ago. "I stayed away," he continued, his voice rougher now, laced with suppressed emotion. "I stayed away because I thought I was the danger. I thought you were better off hating me than mourning me." He paused, and his gaze drifted down to Julia, who was humming a song to herself, oblivious to the heavy tension above her head. "But if I had known," Make's voice dropped to a whisper that sounded like a blade being sharpened. "If I had known you were carrying my child, I would have burned the world down to keep you by my side. I would never have let you go." The betrayal and the desire. Jane felt the sting of tears. The narrative she had built, that he discarded her, that he didn't care, was crumbling. But fear was a stubborn architect. "You forced me to sign," she whispered, the memory of that night stinging like a fresh wound. "You called me weak. I lied," he confessed without hesitation. "I had to make you leave. If I had asked you nicely, you would have stayed. You would have tried to be brave, and you would have died. I broke your heart to save your life." He reached out then. His hand, warm and rough, covered hers. The contact sent a shockwave through her arm, seizing her chest. It had been 4 years of celibacy, 4 years of numbing herself to the touch of any other man, because none of them were him. But you... Meg's thumb brushed over her knuckles, a caress that was both tender and possessive. You kept a secret that changes everything. You stole her from me, Jane. I was protecting her from you, Jane hissed, pulling her hand away, though it cost her every ounce of willpower. Look at you, Meg. Look at this car. Look at the men outside. Is this a life for a little girl? Do you want her to grow up wondering if Daddy is coming home, or if he's in a trunk somewhere? Meg's expression darkened. The storm clouds returned to his eyes. She is a Moretti, he growled. She is royalty in this city. She will be protected. She will be feared. And she will be loved. He looked at Jane, and the anger mixed with something hotter, something carnal that made Jane's breath hitch. And you? Are you really going to tell me you were happy? Selling coffee? Living in a shoebox apartment? Pretending you aren't the woman who used to run my empire by my side? Jane opened her mouth to argue, to lie, but the words died in her throat. Because he was right. She missed the danger. She missed the power. But mostly, God help her, she missed the way he looked at her, like she was the only necessary thing in the universe. The unspoken bond. Suddenly, the car slowed down. The heavy iron gates of the estate loomed ahead, opening slowly to welcome the master home. Julia looked out the window. Is that the castle? Meg smiled, a genuine soft smile that transformed his harsh face. Yes, Piccola. That's home. He turned back to Jane. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by resolve. We are going to fix this, he stated. You are angry. I am furious. But we are not done. We are never done. The car stopped. The door opened. The cool, damp air rushed in, breaking the spell. Mike got out first, carrying Julia. He didn't wait for Jane. He knew she would follow. He knew she had nowhere else to go, and more importantly, he knew she wouldn't leave Julia. Jane stepped out onto the gravel driveway. The mansion stood before her, a looming Gothic structure of stone and glass. It looked like a fortress. It looked like a prison. But as she watched Meg walking up the stairs, shielding her daughter's head from the rain with his own hand, Jane realized the terrifying truth. She wasn't afraid of the house. She wasn't afraid of the Mafia. She was afraid that, now that she was back, she would never want to leave again. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the scent of wet pine and inevitability, and began to walk up the stairs. The Queen had returned to the board, but this time, the rules of the game had changed. The heavy oak doors of the Moretti estate groaned open, a sound that reverberated through the grand foyer like the deep breath of a waking giant. To Julia, it was the entrance to a fairy tale. To Jane, it was the sound of a vault locking shut. Stepping onto the black and white checkered marble floor felt like stepping back in time. Nothing had changed. Absolutely nothing. The crystal chandelier still caught the light in that specific fracturing way that cast rainbows on the dark wood paneling. The smell was the same, a heady mix of beeswax, lemon oil, and the underlying metallic scent of cold stone. It was suffocating. It was comforting. It was home. Mrs. Moretti. The voice was shaky, wet with emotion. Jane turned to see Maria, the head housekeeper, standing by the foot of the grand staircase. The older woman's hands were clasped over her mouth, her eyes wide and glassy. Maria had been a second mother to Jane when she first entered this dangerous world, the only softness in a house of hard edges. Maria, Jane breathed, her throat tight. She moved forward, intending to offer a handshake, but Maria ignored protocol and pulled her into a crushing embrace. We thought... Maria sobbed into Jane's shoulder, her voice a whisper meant only for them. He told us you left. But the way he walked these halls, like a ghost, we thought we'd never see light in this house again. Then, Maria pulled back, wiping her eyes with her apron, and her gaze fell on the little girl holding Meg's hand. If Jane's return was a shock, Julia's presence was a revelation. Maria gasped, her hand flying to her chest. She looked from Make's stoic, unreadable face to the child's curious eyes. "Dio mio," Maria whispered, crossing herself. "She has your chin, signore. But she has the signora's spirit." Make looked down at his daughter. For a man who commanded armies of criminals, he looked strangely vulnerable standing there on the marble floor, holding a pink backpack in one hand and a small, sticky hand in the other. "Maria," Make said, his voice low but commanding the room instantly. "Prepare the nursery, the one in the east wing, and call the security detail. No one enters or leaves the grounds without my direct authorization, not even the wind." "Yes, sir, immediately." Maria beamed at Giulia. "Come, piccola principessa, would you like to see the kitchen? I believe there are cookies that need inspecting." Giulia looked up at her father for permission. It was a small gesture, instinctive, but it made Make's chest expand visibly. He nodded, a sharp, decisive movement. "Go with Maria. She is safe." As the little girl trotted away, chattering about sugar forests, the silence descended upon the foyer again. But this time it was heavier, denser. Make turned to Jane. The distance between them was only a few feet, but it felt charged with 4 years of unsaid words. "Go upstairs," he said. "Rest. You look pale." "I don't want to rest, Make. I want answers." "You will get them," he promised, his eyes darkening. "But first, you need to see." "See what?" "That you never really left. The mausoleum of love." Jane climbed the stairs alone. Her legs felt heavy, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She walked down the long corridor, passing the portraits of Moretti ancestors who scowled from the walls. She stopped in front of the double doors at the end of the hall. The master suite. Her hand trembled as she reached for the brass handle. She expected it to be locked. She expected it to be changed, redecorated to erase her memory, or perhaps converted into a cold, bachelor command center. She turned the handle and pushed. The air inside was stale, preserved, like the air inside a pyramid. Jane stepped in and gasped. The sound was involuntary, a sharp intake of breath that hurt her lungs. It was exactly as she had left it. Not mostly the same. Exactly. Her silk robe was draped over the chaise lounge. The fabric pooled on the floor in the precise, chaotic shape it had fallen when she threw it there 4 years ago while packing in a panic. On the vanity table, her perfume bottle, jasmine and sandalwood, sat open, the cap resting beside it. A tube of lipstick, uncapped, lay on a tissue stained with a red kiss mark. She walked further into the room, her footsteps silent on the thick Persian rug. The book she had been reading, a paperback novel with a cracked spine, was face down on the nightstand, marking the page where she had stopped. A glass of water stood beside it. The water had long since evaporated, leaving a faint chalky ring at the bottom of the crystal glass. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a shrine. It was a crime scene of a marriage, frozen at the moment of death. Jane felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. This wasn't just sentimental. This was obsessive. This was the work of a man who refused to let time move forward. He hadn't just kept her things. He had lived among them, refusing to touch or move a single item that proved she had existed. She approached the closet. She slid the door open. Rows of her dresses hung there, covered in plastic garment bags to protect them from dust. He had preserved her clothes. But then she saw it. On the floor of the closet, on his side, there was a pillow. Her pillow. It was battered, gray with use, indented in the center. He hadn't been sleeping in the bed. He had been sleeping on the floor, next to her clothes, holding her pillow. "I tried to sleep in the bed," a voice said from the doorway. Jane spun around. Make was leaning against the doorframe, his jacket discarded, his tie loosened. He looked exhausted, stripping away the layers of the invincible dawn. "But the bed was too cold," he continued, walking into the room. "The silence was too loud, so I slept there, near your scent, until it faded. And then I just waited." Jane stared at him, her defenses crumbling under the weight of this revelation. She had spent 4 years hating him, convincing herself he was a heartless monster who discarded her. And all while she was serving coffee and crying herself to sleep in a small apartment, he was here, a king sleeping on the floor of a closet, mourning a ghost. "This is madness, Make," she whispered. "This isn't love. It's haunting. Is there a difference?" He stopped a foot away from her. The energy radiating off him was immense. Heat, desire, anger. "You haunted me every second of every day, Jane. I saw your face in every crowd. I heard your voice in every silence. The confrontation of the soul." He reached out and very slowly picked up a lock of her hair. He rubbed the strands between his thumb and forefinger, savoring the texture. "Tell me," he murmured, his voice dropping to that dangerous velvet register. "Did you haunt anyone else?" Jane stiffened. "What?" Make stepped closer. Now he was in her personal space, his chest brushing against hers with every breath. He was overwhelming. 4 years is a long time, he said, his eyes scanning her face, looking for a lie. "You are beautiful. You were alone. Men are not blind." His hand moved from her hair to her jaw, tilting her head up. His grip was firm, not painful, but inescapable. "Did anyone else touch you, Jane?" The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. It wasn't an accusation. It was a desperate need to know. The jealousy in his voice was a living thing, a dark beast pacing behind his eyes. "Make, tell me," he demanded, his thumb tracing her lower lip, dragging it down slightly. "Did anyone else taste this? Did anyone else make you sigh my name? Or did you forget me?" Jane looked into his eyes, those storm cloud eyes that were currently drowning in insecurity. She saw the truth then. He wasn't asking to judge her. He was asking because the thought of her with another man was the one thing that could truly break him. "No," she said softly. "The truth. Pure and simple." Make froze. "No?" "I tried," she lied, wanting to hurt him just a little, to pay back some of the pain. "I tried to move on. I went on dates. I let them buy me dinner." Make's jaw tightened so hard she heard his teeth grind. His pupils dilated until his eyes were almost entirely black. "But," Jane continued, her voice trembling, "when they touched me, their hands were wrong. Their smell was wrong. They weren't heavy enough." She looked at his chest, unable to meet his gaze. "They weren't you. So, no. No one touched me. Not really. I was just as haunted as you were." The air left Make's lungs in a rush. The tension in his shoulders broke. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. That would be too simple. Instead, he buried his face in the crook of her neck. He inhaled deeply, breathing her in like a drowning man breaking the surface of the water. "Mine," he growled against her skin, the vibration sending shivers down to her toes. "You are mine. You have always been mine. And I swear on my life, Jane, I will never let you walk out of that door again." Jane closed her eyes, her hands instinctively coming up to clutch his shirt. She knew she should push him away. She knew she should fight for her independence, for the safety of the simple life she had built. But standing there, in the museum of their marriage, with his heat enveloping her and his scent filling her lungs, the fight drained out of her. "What about the danger?" she asked weakly, her voice muffled by his shirt. "What about the reasons you sent me away?" Make pulled back just enough to look at her. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by the cold, hard resolve of the capo. "The danger is dead," he said. "I killed them all. Every single one of them. And anyone who dares to look at you or our daughter now." He paused, and a dark, cruel smile touched his lips. A smile that promised violence to the world and safety to her. "Will pray for the mercy of hell, because I will show them none." The interruption. A knock on the door shattered the moment. Make didn't pull away immediately. He lingered for a second, stealing one last touch, before straightening up and buttoning his demeanor back into place. "Enter," he barked. The door opened and Luca, his head of security, stepped in. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes fixed strictly on the floor. "Boss, sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation at the perimeter." Make's face turned to stone. The lover vanished. The killer returned. "What kind of situation?" "It's a delivery, sir. A package, left at the main gate." Luca hesitated. "It has a name on it, not yours." "Whose?" Make demanded. "Julia's." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Jane gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Make didn't move. He didn't blink. But the energy around him shifted from protective to lethal. "Bring it to the study," he ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. "And call the bomb squad. If there is a scratch on that box, I will have your head." Luca nodded and vanished. Make turned back to Jane. "Stay here," he said. It wasn't a request. "Make, what is going on? Who knows about her?" Jane cried, panic rising. "I will handle it," he said, walking to the door. He stopped at the threshold and looked back. "Welcome home, Jane. The peace was nice while it lasted, but it seems the war isn't quite over." He stepped out, and the door clicked shut. Jane stood alone in the center of the shrine, surrounded by her past, with the terrifying realization that the future she had run from had just caught up with her. And this time, there was a target on her daughter's back. The study was exactly as Jane remembered it, a cavern of dark mahogany, leather, and the lingering scent of smoke. It was the room where wars were planned and death sentences were signed. Now, it was the room where a cardboard box sat in the center of the massive desk, innocent and terrifying. Make stood behind the desk, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. The snap of the rubber against his wrist was the only sound in the room, sharp as a gunshot. "Stay back," he ordered, his voice devoid of the warmth he had shown in the bedroom. He was the Don now. Cold, calculating. A machine made for problem-solving. Jane stood by the fireplace, her arms wrapped around herself. She felt cold, despite the fire crackling in the hearth. "Just open it, Make." He picked up a letter opener, a silver dagger, really, and slit the tape. One clean motion. No hesitation. He opened the flaps. He peered inside. For a long moment, he didn't move. He didn't breathe. The silence stretched until it hummed in Jane's ears. Then, slowly, he reached in and pulled out the object. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a severed body part. It was a teddy bear. A small brown teddy bear with a red ribbon. And in its paw, it held a lollipop. Jane stopped breathing. "The sugar forest," she whispered, the blood draining from her face. Julia talked about the sugar forest. Today. In the cafe. Make placed the bear on the desk, as if it were made of radioactive glass. His jaw was set so hard, the tendons in his neck stood out like steel cables. "They weren't just tracking me," he said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "They were there, listening. They were watching you while I was watching you." He reached into the box again and pulled out a card, a simple cream-colored card with elegant handwriting. He read it, and his eyes narrowed into slits of pure fury. "What does it say?" Jane took a step forward. "Don't," Make warned. "Read it to me, Make." He looked at her, his expression grim. He flipped the card. "She has your temper, Alessandro. Let's hope she doesn't have your luck. Welcome back to the game." No signature. Just a small, hand-drawn symbol at the bottom. A serpent eating its own tail. The fracture in the armor Make crumpled the card in his fist. "Ouroboros," he snarled. "The circle." "Who are they?" Jane asked, her fear transforming into a cold, hard knot of anger. "You said you killed them all. You said the war was over." "I killed the families," Make said, pacing behind the desk, his energy filling the room like a caged tiger. "The Russos, the Triads, the Old Guard. I burned their empires to ash to keep you safe. But this," he gestured to the crumpled card, "this is a ghost story, a myth. Mercenaries who don't work for territory or money. They work for chaos." He slammed his hands onto the desk, leaning his weight on them, head hung low. "I missed it," he whispered, a confession of failure that sounded alien coming from him. I was so focused on the visible threats, on clearing the board. I didn't see the shadow underneath. Jane walked over to the desk. She looked at the teddy bear. It was a mockery, a violation. Someone had been close enough to hear her daughter's fantasies and used them as a weapon. She looked at Make. He looked defeated. Not beaten, but shaken. The armor of the invincible king was cracked. He blamed himself. For the first time in 4 years, Jane didn't see the monster who abandoned her. She saw the man who was drowning in responsibility. She walked around the desk. Make. He didn't look up. I failed. I brought you back here thinking it was a fortress, and I brought you straight into a trap. Jane reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. The muscle under his shirt was hard as rock, tense with the urge to destroy something. Look at me. He lifted his head. His eyes were haunted. I should send you away, he said hoarsely. I should put you and Julia on a plane tonight. New identities. Somewhere I can never find you. No, Jane said firmly. The word hung in the air. Make blinked. What? No, she repeated, her voice gaining strength. I ran once, Make. I spent 4 years looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, terrified of every knock on the door. I am done running. She grabbed the lapels of his shirt and pulled him closer, forcing him to face her. You said I was a queen. Treat me like one. Stop trying to protect me from the reality of our life. If they want a war, fine. But this time, I am not a piece on the board that you sacrifice. I am the player sitting next to you. Mak stared at her. He looked at the fire in her eyes, the set of her jaw. He searched for the frightened girl he had divorced 4 years ago, but she was gone. The woman standing in front of him had been forged in the same fire of loneliness that he had. A strange expression crossed his face. Pride. Dark, consuming pride. You are dangerous, he murmured, his hands coming up to cup her face. More dangerous than them. I'm a mother, Jane said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. And they just threatened my child. I don't want to hide Make. I want them dead. The strategic intimacy. Make let out a breath that sounded like a laugh, though there was no humor in it. It was relief. God, I missed you, he said. And this time, he didn't hold back. He pulled her against him, crashing his lips onto hers. It wasn't a sweet kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of 4 years of starvation. It was a collision of teeth and tongues, a frantic attempt to reclaim ownership. Jane melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. The fear of the box, the threat, the past. It all dissolved in the heat of his touch. This was the only place that made sense. In the eye of the storm. Make lifted her effortlessly, setting her on the edge of the mahogany desk, pushing the teddy bear aside without breaking the kiss. He stepped between her legs, pressing his body against hers, grounding her. I will find them, he vowed against her lips, his voice rough. I will find every single one of them, and I will make them regret the day they learned her name. Jane pulled back slightly, breathless, her forehead resting against his. She corrected him. We will find them. Make looked at her, his eyes searching hers. You have to trust me, Jane, completely. If we do this, there are no secrets, no locked doors, no lies. No lies, she agreed. But that goes both ways. You tell me everything. No more protecting me from the ugly truth. Deal. The intruder in the night. The moment was broken, not by a knock, but by a sound from the baby monitor sitting on the side table. A device Luca must have set up while they were arguing. Daddy? The small, fearful voice crackled through the speaker. Make and Jane froze. They pulled apart instantly, the parents taking over the lovers. She's awake, Jane said, hopping off the desk. Go, Make said, straightening his shirt, the mask of the capo sliding back into place, though his eyes remained warm when he looked at Jane. I have calls to make. I need to mobilize the ghosts. Go to her. I'll come up when the perimeter is secure. Jane nodded. She walked to the door, but stopped. She looked back at the man standing in the shadows of his empire. Make? Yes? Don't sleep in the closet tonight. He looked at her, silence stretching between them. I won't, he promised softly. Jane left the study. Make waited until the door clicked shut. Then, his face transformed. The warmth evaporated, leaving only cold, sadistic calculation. He picked up the phone on his desk and dialed a number that hadn't been used in years. It's me, he said when the line clicked open. Wake up the dogs. We are hunting. The bedroom upstairs. The nursery was bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a moon. Julia was sitting up in the massive bed, clutching her blanket. Mama? I'm here, baby. Jane rushed over, sitting on the edge of the bed. Did you have a bad dream? The house makes noises, Julia whispered. It groans. It's just an old house, sweetheart. It's just stretching its bones. Julia looked at the door. Where is the big man, the daddy? Jane's heart clenched. He's working, keeping us safe. Julia thought about this for a moment. Is he a good monster? She asked seriously. Like in the stories? Jane stroked her daughter's hair, thinking of the man downstairs who was currently ordering violence to protect them. Thinking of the man who slept on the floor clutching her pillow. Yes, Julia, Jane whispered. He is the best kind of monster. He's our monster. Julia nodded, satisfied, and lay back down. Jane stayed there, listening to her daughter's breathing even out. She looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but the fog was rolling in, thick and white, swallowing the grounds. She wasn't naive. She knew the teddy bear was just the opening move. The circle was watching. But as she sat there in the dark, Jane realized she wasn't trembling anymore. Let them come. They had woken up the queen, and they had no idea what she was capable of doing to protect her cub. Morning in the Moretti estate did not break softly. It arrived with military precision. Jane sat at the long mahogany dining table, a vast expanse of polished wood that could seat 20, but currently held only 3. The contrast was jarring. On one side, there was the brutal reality of their existence. Luca and 2 other guards stood by the French doors, their silhouettes dark against the morning sun, earpieces wired, hands clasped loosely in front of them but ready to draw weapons in a heartbeat. On the other side, there was Julia. The toddler was oblivious to the tension. She was busy drowning a stack of pancakes in maple syrup, her legs swinging happily beneath the chair. She was wearing a pink tiara she had found in her backpack, a plastic trinket that looked ridiculous and perfect amidst the antique furniture and somber men. More syrup, signorina? Mike lowered his newspaper. He wasn't reading the news. Jane knew he was reading intelligence reports. He folded the paper precisely and looked at his daughter. The terrifying Don Moretti, the man who made grown men tremble, picked up the syrup jug with the gravity of handling a nuclear code. Just a little, he murmured, pouring a tiny drop. Sugar makes you fast. Too much sugar makes you crash. I want to be fast, Julia declared, shoving a forkful of pancake into her mouth. Fast like a cheetah. Cheetahs are good, Make agreed, wiping a smudge of syrup from her chin with his thumb. But lions are better. Lions don't run unless they have to. Lions make everyone else run. Jane watched them over the rim of her coffee cup. The domesticity of the scene made her chest ache. It was a beautiful lie. They looked like a normal family, if you ignored the Glocks under the guards' jackets, and the fact that a secret society had sent a death threat via a teddy bear less than 12 hours ago. She set the cup down. The porcelain clinked sharply. "We need to talk about the bear," she said. The air in the room shifted. The guards stiffened. Make's eyes didn't leave Julia, but his posture changed. The father receded. The strategist emerged. "Not here," he said, his voice flat. "Yes, here," Jane insisted, keeping her voice low. "She's 3, Make. She's busy eating. And I'm not going to be kept in the dark while you play general. You promised. No secrets." Make looked at her. He saw the resolve in her eyes. He nodded once, a sharp dip of his chin. Luca took the package to the lab in the basement. Forensics is running prints, DNA, fiber analysis. So far, nothing. It's clean, surgically clean. It can't be clean, Jane said, frowning. Her mind went back to the moment she saw the bear. Something had bothered her. Not the thread itself, but a detail she couldn't place. Let me see it. Absolutely not. Make, I worked in a cafe for 4 years. I know people. I know smells. I notice things about my customers that they didn't even know about themselves. Just let me see it. Make studied her for a long moment. Then he stood up. Luca, stay with Julia. Watch her like a hawk. Yes, boss. Make extended a hand to Jane. Come with me. The scent of betrayal. The basement of the estate wasn't a dungeon. It was a high-tech command center. Monitors covered one wall, displaying live feeds of every corner of the property. In the center, on a stainless steel table under bright halogen lights, sat the teddy bear. It looked pathetic and ominous, sealed inside a clear evidence bag. Jane walked up to the table. The sterile white light made the brown fur look grayish. Open the bag, she requested. Jane, if there's a toxin... You said it was clean. Open it. Make sighed, swiped a key card, and unzipped the seal. The smell hit Jane instantly. It wasn't strong. To anyone else, it might have just smelled like synthetic fur and cardboard. But Jane closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, letting her memory transport her back to the cafe. She sorted through the scents in her mind. Dust, cardboard, glue, and underneath it all, a faint, sharp note. Acidic. Medicinal. And something sweet. Not candy. Flowers. Lavender, she whispered. Lavender and antiseptic. Industrial cleaner. She opened her eyes and looked at Make. Who smells like heavy-duty hospital cleaner and lavender perfume? Make frowned, his mind working. A nurse? A cleaner? No. Jane shook her head, pacing around the table. It's specific. It's the smell of the blue heron. Make froze. And the retirement home? The nursing home 3 blocks from the cafe, Jane realized, the pieces clicking into place. There was a man, Mr. Henderson. He came in every Tuesday. Old, harmless, always ordered a chamomile tea. He smelled exactly like this, like the cleaner they use on the floors there and the potpourri in the lobby. An old man? Make looked skeptical. He talked to Julia, Jane said, her blood running cold. He used to tell her stories about a magical forest made of sweets. Make's face went deadly still. The temperature in the room plummeted. He wasn't an old man, Make growled. Or if he wasn't harmless. He was a spotter, a scout. He grabbed his phone, typing furiously. Luca, get a team to the Blue Heron nursing home. Look for a resident or employee named Henderson. If he's there, bring him. If he's gone, burn the room down and sift through the ashes for intel. He looked at Jane, and there was a new respect in his eyes. A burning intensity. You found him? He said softly. My $1 million security team missed it, and you found him with your nose. I told you, Jane said, her voice trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. I'm not a pawn, Make. I'm the queen. Make walked around the table and stopped in front of her. He didn't touch her, but the heat radiating from him was palpable. A queen needs to know how to wield a sword, he murmured. If you are going to be in this war, Jane, you need to be ready, physically. What do you mean? Meet me in the gym in 10 minutes, change into something you can move in. The dance of violence. The gym was a converted ballroom, lined with mats and filled with heavy bags, weights, and racks of training weapons. When Jane arrived, wearing leggings and a fitted tank top, Make was already there. He had shed his suit jacket and tie. His white dress shirt was rolled up to the elbows, revealing forearms that were thick with muscle and mapped with veins. He looked dangerous. Primal. Come here, he ordered, standing in the center of the mat. Jane walked onto the soft surface. She felt exposed without her coat, without a counter to stand behind. "I don't know how to fight, Make." "I know," he said. "That changes today. I can't teach you to be a black belt in an afternoon, but I can teach you how to get away, how to survive long enough for me to get to you." He moved fast. 1 second he was standing 3 feet away. The next, his forearm locked around her upper chest, pulling her back into a controlled hold. Jane gasped, instinctively grabbing his arm. "Don't panic," his voice rumbled in her ear, calm and controlled against her frantic heartbeat. "Panic kills you faster than the bullet. Feel my grip. Where's the gap?" I can't." "Breathe, Jane. Feel it." She forced herself to stop trashing. She felt his forearm against her windpipe, but not crushing it. There was a space near the elbow. "The elbow," she choked out. "Good. Now drop your weight, become heavy, and drive your heel into my instep. Hard." She did it. She stomped down. Make grunted and loosened his grip instantly. Jane spun out, gasping for air. "Good," he said, his eyes dark with approval. Again. For the next hour, he was relentless. He attacked her, grabbed her, pinned her. It was exhausting. It was bruising. And it was undeniably, terrifyingly erotic. Every movement was a clash of momentum and breath. His hands guided her balance and resistance, not to caress, but to teach. And something raw and dangerous stirred inside her. That had nothing to do with self-defense. They ended up on the floor. Make used his weight to immobilize her movements, securing her wrists against the mat with practiced control. It was a position designed to end a fight, not to invite one. "You're dead," he whispered, looking down at her. His chest was heaving. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. "If I were an enemy, you would be dead right now, Jane." "I'm not dead," she panted, looking up into his storm-gray eyes. She bucked her hips, not to escape, but to challenge him. "I'm still fighting." Something snapped in Make's face. The teacher vanished. The man appeared. His gaze dropped to her lips, then to the pulse fluttering wildly in her neck. "You are dangerous," he groaned. He lowered his head. Jane thought he was going to kiss her. She wanted him to kiss her. Her body arched instinctively, but he stopped inches from her mouth. "I can't," he whispered, his voice ragged. "If I start, I won't stop, and we have a war to fight." He released her wrists and rolled off her, standing up in one fluid motion. He offered her a hand. Jane took it, feeling the electricity shoot up her arm. She stood up, her legs wobbly. "Go shower," Make said, turning away, running a hand through his hair. "Henderson. We need to focus on Henderson." He was running away. The great Make Moretti was fleeing from the tension between them. Jane felt a surge of feminine power. The crack in the mirror. Jane showered quickly, the hot water washing away the sweat, but not the lingering sensation of Make's hands on her skin. She dressed in fresh clothes, jeans and a soft sweater, and headed to Make's study. She wanted to know about the team sent to the nursing home. The door to the study was ajar. "Make?" No answer. The room was empty. The computer screen behind the desk was glowing. Jane walked in, intending to wait for him. As she approached the desk, the screensaver on the computer deactivated, likely triggered by the motion of her entering the room. The screen displayed a grid of files. She shouldn't look. She respected his privacy, but the title of the open folder caught her eye. Project, Sanctuary, Surveillance Logs, 2021-2024. Subject, Jane Moretti, Doe. Jane froze. Her hand hovered over the mouse. "No lies," he had said. "I stayed away," he had said. She clicked the file. Photos flooded the screen, hundreds of them. Jane at the park with Julia in a stroller. Jane buying groceries. Jane crying on a park bench on her birthday. Jane sleeping, taken through the window of her apartment with a long-range lens. It wasn't just protection. There were notes. Detailed psychological profiles written by Make himself. Subject appears distressed. Considering intervention, negative, must maintain distance. Subject spoke to a man at the library. Background check on man initiated. Clean. Watch him. And then, the last file. Dated 1 week ago. Reacquisition strategy. Jane felt the bile rise in her throat. Reacquisition. Like she was an asset, a stolen car. He hadn't just come to the cafe because of the threat. The date on the file was before the teddy bear arrived. He was planning to take her back anyway. The threat was real, yes, but he was going to shatter her peace regardless. Jane? She spun around. Make stood in the doorway. He was holding a file folder. He looked at her face, then at the computer screen. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look sorry. He looked resigned. You said you stayed away, Jane whispered, her voice shaking with betrayal. You said you didn't know about Julia. I didn't know about Julia, Make said, walking into the room, closing the door behind him. The photos, they were from a distance. I never saw the child clearly. I avoided looking too close because it hurt too much. I focused on you. Reacquisition strategy. She spat the words at him. You were going to kidnap me. I was going to save you from a mediocre life, he countered, his voice rising. I waited 4 years, Jane. 4 years of hell. I was done waiting. So the bear? The threat? Was it even real? She backed away from him. Or did you orchestrate that too? Just to get me into the car? Make stopped. His face went cold. Careful, Jane. You can accuse me of obsession. You can accuse me of being a stalker, but never accuse me of endangering my family. He threw the folder he was holding onto the desk. It slid across the wood and stopped in front of her. The team got to the nursing home, he said, his voice like ice. Henderson is gone. But they found this in his room. Jane looked down at the folder. It was open. Inside was a photograph. It was a picture of Make, taken yesterday, entering the cafe. And through the crosshairs drawn in red marker over his chest, you could see the reflection in the window. The reflection of Jane and Julia. The threat is real, Make said. But you're right about one thing. I didn't come to the cafe to save you from them. I came to take you back because I couldn't breathe without you anymore. He leaned against the door, blocking the exit. So now you know. I am selfish, I am obsessed, and I am a liar. But I am the only thing standing between that crosshair and our daughter. Jane stared at him. The man she loved. The monster she feared. They were the same person. And God help her, she didn't know which one she needed more right now. The argument in the study had not ended. It had merely been paused by the suffocating weight of necessity. Night had fallen over the Moretti estate, heavy and moonless. The fog that had rolled in earlier now pressed against the windows like a white shroud, isolating the house from the rest of the world. Inside, the silence was absolute. Jane sat in the nursery, in a rocking chair positioned where she could see both the door and Julia's bed. She wasn't rocking. She was a statue of tension. Her mind was a battlefield, torn between the betrayal of the surveillance logs and the terrifying reality of the crosshairs on the photograph. He watched me. He stalked me. He lied. He is the only thing keeping us alive. The door cracked open. A slice of hallway light cut across the dark room. Make stood there. He had changed out of his suit into tactical gear, black cargo pants, a fitted black t-shirt that clung to his chest, and a holster strapped to his thigh. He looked less like a husband and more like a weapon of war. The perimeter is secure, he whispered, his voice rough. He didn't enter the room. He respected the invisible line she had drawn between them. But the fog is messing with the thermal cameras. I don't like it. Jane looked at him, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. You think they're coming tonight. If I were them, I would come tonight, Make admitted. Psychological warfare. They sent the bear to make us panic. They want us exhausted, jumping at shadows. That's when mistakes happen. He gripped the doorknob, his knuckles white. I'll be right outside the door, Jane. I won't sleep. If you need anything. I need to know if it was worth it. She interrupted, her voice a whisper that carried across the room. The 4 years. The lies. Was the empire worth the empty bed, Make? Make looked at her, and even in the dim light, she saw the devastation in his eyes. No, he said simply. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and I am going to spend the rest of my days trying to fix it. He began to close the door. Click. But the sound didn't come from the latch. It came from the hallway ceiling. A sharp, electronic fizz. Then, darkness. The blackout. The slice of light from the hallway vanished. The nightlight in the nursery died. The hum of the air conditioning unit ceased. Absolute, crushing darkness swallowed the house. Jane! Make's voice was no longer a whisper. It was a command barked in the dark. The door was kicked open fully. A beam of tactical light cut through the blackness, blindingly bright, sweeping the room until it landed on Jane. Get Julia. Now. Jane didn't hesitate. The anger evaporated, replaced by cold adrenaline. She lunged for the bed. Julia, baby, wake up. The toddler groaned, shifting in her sleep. Mama? Shh. We're playing a game. The quiet game. Jane scooped her up, wrapping the blanket around her small body. To the panic room, Make ordered, grabbing Jane's arm and pulling her into the hallway. They cut the hard line. They jammed the signal. The electronic locks are dead. How did they get past the gate? Jane asked, struggling to keep up with his long strides as they moved down the corridor. They didn't, Make growled, sweeping his flashlight beam across the stairwell. They were already inside. Inside. The word chilled Jane's blood. The corridor of shadows. They reached the top of the grand staircase. The foyer below was a cavern of shadows. Make stopped abruptly, throwing an arm out to halt Jane. Wait. He killed his flashlight. Darkness returned. Jane held her breath, clutching Julia's head to her shoulder to muffle any sound. Then she heard it. The sound of wet boots on marble. Squish, squish, soft, deliberate, coming from the kitchen hallway. Luca, Make called out into the void. A laugh answered them. It wasn't Luca. It was a dry, rasping sound. Luca is indisposed, Mr. Moretti. He had a disagreement with a garrote wire. Make stiffened. He pushed Jane back toward the wall behind a large antique vase. Stay here, he breathed into her ear. Do not move until I say so. A flare was lit in the foyer below. A red, sputtering light that cast demonic shadows against the walls. 3 men stood at the bottom of the stairs. They wore black tactical gear, but no masks. They wanted their faces to be the last thing the Morettis saw. In the center stood a man Jane didn't recognize, but whose smell she remembered instantly. Lavender and antiseptic. Henderson, she whispered. He looked younger without the old man disguise he wore at the cafe, but the cruel set of his mouth was the same. Come down, Alessandro, Henderson called out, twirling a combat knife. The Queen is waiting for an audience. Make stepped out from the shadows of the landing. He looked like a god of vengeance bathed in red light. You made a mistake coming into my house, Make said, his voice calm, terrifyingly conversational. Did I? Henderson smirked. I don't think so. The circle sends its regards. Henderson raised a hand. The 2 men flanking him raised silenced pistols. Make didn't wait. He moved with a speed that defied physics. He vaulted over the banister, dropping 12 feet to the marble floor below, landing in a crouch right in the center of the trio. The violence of protection. The fight was chaos. Make was a blur of motion. He swept the leg of the first gunman before the man could pull the trigger. The sound of bone snapping echoed in the large hall. The second gunman fired. Foot. Dust exploded from the marble floor where Make had been a split second before. Jane watched from the top of the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs. She covered Julia's ears. Don't look, baby. Keep your eyes closed. Make was fighting for their lives. He disarmed the second man with a brutal chop to the throat, turning the man's own body into a shield against Henderson's knife. But there were too many of them. And then, Jane saw the 4th shadow. While Make was engaged with the 3 men below, A figure detached itself from the shadows of the second-floor balcony. He had climbed the trellis outside. He was behind Jane. Jane felt the presence before she heard it. The air shifted. She spun around, clutching Julia with one arm. A man stood there, smelling of rain and sweat. He lunged. "Give me the brat," he hissed, grabbing Jane's arm. Panic flared, white and hot. But beneath the panic, a voice spoke. "Drop your weight. Find the gap." Jane didn't scream. She didn't pull away, which is what he expected. Instead, she stepped into him. She used the momentum he didn't anticipate. "Hold on tight, Julia," she whispered. She dropped her center of gravity, just as Make had taught her hours ago. She became heavy, an anchor. The man's grip faltered for a fraction of a second. Jane drove the heel of her boot down, hard, into the delicate bones of his instep. He howled in pain, his grip loosening. Jane didn't stop. She spun, using her free elbow like a hammer, driving it backward into his ribs. It wasn't a knockout blow. She wasn't strong enough for that. But it was enough. The man stumbled back, wheezing, surprised by the ferocity of the prey. "Make!" she screamed. Below, Make heard her. He looked up. He saw the man recovering, reaching for a knife to lunge at Jane again. The reaction was instantaneous. Make abandoned the fight with Henderson. He ignored the knife slicing across his own bicep. He raised his gun and fired one shot. Bang. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The man on the balcony jerked backward, his shoulder exploding in red, and he fell over the railing, crashing onto the marble floor below. The price of loyalty. The distraction cost Make. Henderson saw the opening. He lunged, driving his blade toward Make's exposed side. Make twisted at the last second, but not fast enough. The blade sank in, just above the hip. Jane screamed. Make didn't make a sound. He grabbed Henderson's wrist, looking him dead in the eye. "My turn," Make snarled. He headbutted Henderson, a brutal cracking sound of skull on nose. Henderson crumpled, dropping the knife, blood pouring from his face. The foyer was silent again, save for the heavy, ragged breathing of the men. The attackers were down. Make stood in the center of the carnage. He swayed slightly. He looked up at the balcony. "Jane? I'm okay," she sobbed, rushing to the railing. "We're okay." Make nodded. Then his knees gave out. He collapsed onto the floor. The sanctuary. Getting him to the panic room was a blur of terror. Luca, who was injured but alive, had dragged himself into the foyer moments later to secure the prisoners. Jane had rushed down, handing Julia to a weeping Maria, who emerged from the kitchen, and focused entirely on Make. Now they were locked inside the panic room, a reinforced steel bunker hidden behind a bookcase in the library. It was stark, white, and smelled of ozone. Make lay on the medical cot. His shirt was cut open. The wound on his side was ugly, sluggishly bleeding dark red. Jane's hands were shaking, but they were efficient. She pressed gauze against the wound. "You idiot," she cried, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the sweat. "You total idiot. You looked away." Make hissed through his teeth as she applied pressure. His face was gray, drained of color, but his eyes were locked on hers. They were bright with fever and intensity. "You," he wheezed. "You fought back." "I did what you told me," she snapped, grabbing a bandage roll. "I dropped my weight." A weak smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good girl," he whispered. "My warrior queen." "Shut up, Make. Don't you dare die on me. Not after you dragged me back here. You don't get to leave me again." He reached up. His hand was stained with his own blood. He cupped her cheek, leaving a crimson smear on her skin. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, his voice fading slightly. "But you need to know." "Henderson," he whispered something before he passed out. Jane froze, her hand pausing over the bandage. "What?" Make's eyes darkened. He said, "The inner circle is broken. The traitor is inside the house." Jane stared at him. The bunker felt suddenly smaller. "Inside the house?" But it's just us, the staff, Luca. Make shook his head weakly. No. Someone gave them the codes to the electronic locks. Someone told them about the nursery layout. He gripped her hand, his strength surprising her. Trust no one, Jane. Not Maria, not Luca. Just me. Only me. Jane looked at the bloody bandage, then at the steel door that locked them in. They were safe from the outside world. But if the traitor was inside, they had just locked themselves in a cage with a ghost. Make's eyes fluttered shut. Stay awake, Make, she ordered, shaking him gently. He forced his eyes open. I'm awake, he mumbled. Just dreaming of the cafe. It was quieter there. Jane leaned down and kissed his forehead. It was cold and clammy. We'll get back there, she whispered, a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Once we kill every monster in the closet. She looked at the security monitors on the wall of the panic room. The feeds were coming back online. She saw the foyer being cleaned up. She saw Luca barking orders. And then she saw it. On the camera feed for the kitchen hallway, Maria was standing there, watching the cleanup. She wasn't crying anymore. She was typing on a cell phone. Jane's heart stopped. Maria, the woman who raised Make, the woman who gave Julia cookies. The traitor is inside the house. Jane looked down at her unconscious husband, then back at the screen. The war hadn't ended in the foyer. It had just begun. The panic room existed outside of time. There were no windows to show the rising sun, only the sterile hum of the air filtration system and the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor hooked up to Make's chest. Jane sat on the edge of the narrow medical cot. Her hands, usually so steady when pouring latte art, were now performing a much more delicate task. She was cleaning the wound on her husband's side. The bleeding had stopped, thanks to the coagulant powder from the emergency kit, but the angry red gash against his pale skin was a stark reminder of how close she had come to widowhood. Make was awake. His eyes were heavy, glazed with pain and the after effects of adrenaline, but they were locked on her face. He watched her with a kind of reverent wonder, as if he were seeing a religious apparition. You have good hands, he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel being crushed. Steady. My hands are shaking, Make, Jane whispered, not looking up from her work. She taped the fresh gauze in place, her fingers brushing the hard muscle of his abdomen. The heat radiating from him was intense. A low-grade fever fighting off the trauma. Internal shaking, he corrected. But on the outside, you are calm. You are a natural. Jane finally met his gaze. In the harsh white light of the bunker, stripped of his suit and his armor, Make looked younger. He looked like the man she had fallen in love with before she knew what his last name meant. I'm not a natural, she confessed. I'm terrified. I'm just... She paused, searching for the word. I'm angry. I'm so angry that they touched our home. That they touched you. Make reached out, capturing her hand. He brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles. His lips were dry, fever-hot. Anger is good, he murmured against her skin. Fear paralyzes. Anger mobilizes. Use it. He tried to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. Lay back down, Jane ordered, pushing his shoulder gently. I can't, he grunted, fighting the pain to prop himself up on one elbow. The phone. Maria, you saw something. Jane's expression hardened. The softness of the nurse vanished, replaced by the cold resolve of the matriarch. I saw her texting, right after the attack, while Luca was securing the prisoners. She looked guilty. Make's face darkened. The betrayal cut deeper than the knife. Maria has been with the family for 30 years. She changed my diapers. If she is the leak... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. In his world, the punishment for treason was absolute. I'm going to find out, Jane said, standing up. Jane, no. Make tried to grab her, but he was too weak. You don't confront a mole alone. If she is compromised, she could be armed, or desperate. She's not armed. She's Maria, Jane said. though her heart hammered in her chest. "And you can't walk. Luca is injured. There is no one else, Make. It's me. It has to be me." She walked to the heavy steel door. She punched in the code Make had whispered to her earlier. "Jane." She looked back. "Watch the monitors. If I'm wrong, open the door. If I'm right, lock it and don't open it for anyone but me." The kitchen confessional. The house was quiet. The carnage in the foyer had been cleared, the blood mopped up with terrifying efficiency by the cleanup crew. The estate looked normal again, which made it all the more sinister. Jane found Maria in the kitchen. The older woman was standing over the industrial sink, scrubbing a pot with manic intensity. Her shoulders were shaking. Jane stopped in the doorway. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She simply observed. She saw the phone sitting on the counter. Show. Don't tell. Jane walked across the room. Her footsteps were silent on the tile. She reached out and placed her hand over the phone. Maria jumped, spinning around. A gasp tore from her throat. She looked at Jane, and then at the phone under Jane's hand. Her face crumpled. "Signora, who were you texting, Maria?" Jane asked. Her voice was calm, dangerously calm. It was Make's voice coming out of her mouth. No one. My sister. She is sick. Don't lie to me." Jane picked up the phone. "Make is in a bunker bleeding because someone told those men how to get in. Someone gave them the codes." Maria fell to her knees. It was a sudden dramatic collapse, the weight of her guilt too heavy to bear standing up. She grabbed the hem of Jane's sweater, sobbing. "They have my son. My Paolo." Jane froze. The code, the leverage. Who? "The men." Maria wept, her face buried in her hands. "They called me 3 days ago. They sent a video. Paolo. They had him in a chair. They said, if I didn't disable the perimeter alarm at 2 a.m., they would kill him." Jane felt a wave of nausea, but she pushed it down. "So you traded my husband's life for your son's." "I didn't think they would kill the signore," Maria cried, looking up, her eyes red and swollen. "They said they just wanted to talk, to send a message. I didn't know they would bring knives. I swear on the Virgin Mary, I didn't know." Jane looked down at the woman who had baked cookies for Julia yesterday. She felt pity, yes, but she also felt the cold, hard logic of survival. She unlocked Maria's phone. "Show me the messages." Maria pointed with a trembling finger. Jane read the exchange. It was brutal. Brief instructions, threats, and a final message sent by Maria 10 minutes ago. He is alive. The wife is alive. They are in the library. Jane stared at the screen. "You told them where we are." "They asked," Maria sobbed. "They said they would release Paolo if I gave them an update." Jane closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. She thought of Make's words. Trust no one. But she also thought of Julia. If someone held Julia, what would Jane be capable of doing? Anything. Everything. Jane made a choice. She knelt down, bringing her face level with Maria's. "Stop crying." Maria hiccuped, trying to stifle her sobs. "You are going to fix this," Jane said. Her voice was steel. "You are going to get your son back. And you are going to save my family." "How? I am just a housekeeper." "Not anymore," Jane said, handing the phone back to her. "Now, you are a double agent. The Trojan horse." Jane returned to the panic room 20 minutes later. Make was sitting up, pale and sweating, staring at the monitors where he had watched the entire silent exchange in the kitchen. "You didn't kill her," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," Jane said. "I weaponized her." She pulled a chair close to the cot. "They have her son. That's how they turned her. But the circle made a mistake. They think Maria is just a scared old woman. They think she's broken." "Is she?" "She's a mother, Make," Jane said fiercely, "and she's furious that they lied to her about the talk. She's willing to do whatever I say to get Paolo back and punish them." Mike studied her. A slow, painful smile spread across his face. You amaze me. So what is the plan, Capo? We give them what they want, Jane said. She leaned forward, her eyes shining with the thrill of the strategy. They want us weak. They want us separated. They think the happy family reunion is our strength, so they are attacking it. But what if we show them that the reunion failed? Make frowned, intrigued. Go on. Maria is going to text them back. She's going to tell them that I'm hysterical, that I'm blaming you for the attack, that I'm taking Julia and leaving tonight. Make understood instantly. A decoy. Exactly. We stage a fight, a loud one. I pack a bag. I take a car. I leave the estate. Maria tells them my route. And they will ambush you, Make said, his voice dropping. No. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. They will try to ambush me, Jane corrected him. But I won't be in the car. Who will be in the car? You, Jane said. Or rather, your best men. But the windows will be tinted. They will stop the car to grab the runaway wife. And instead of a terrified woman, they will find an armored squad ready to rain hell. Make stared at her. It was brilliant. It was classic counterintelligence. It used the enemy's own leverage, Maria, and their own assumptions that Jane was weak against them. And while they are attacking the decoy car, Make mused. While they are focused on the car, Jane finished, we track Maria's phone. Because to coordinate the ambush, the handler, the one holding her son, will have to be in contact. We trace the signal back to the source. We find Paolo. And we find the head of the snake. The intimacy of War Make fell silent. He looked at the ceiling of the bunker, then back at his wife. It requires you to trust me, he said softly. To stay here, hidden, while I send men out. No, Jane shook her head. I'm not staying hidden. You can't lead the strike team, Make. You can barely stand. Luca will lead the team in the car. You and I. We are going to be the command center. Make groaned. I hate sitting on the sidelines. You aren't on the sidelines. You are the king, Jane soothed him, reaching out to stroke his hair, damp with sweat. Kings don't fight in the mud unless they have to. Kings move the pieces. Make leaned into her touch. His defenses were completely eroded. The pain, the fear of losing her, the pride in her strength, it all mixed into a potent cocktail of emotion. Come here, he whispered. Jane hesitated, then carefully climbed onto the narrow cot beside him, mindful of his injury. He wrapped his good arm around her, pulling her flush against his side. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of rain and resilience. I thought I lost you, he confessed into the silence. When I saw that man on the balcony, you saved me, Jane whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. You saved yourself, he corrected. I just finished the job. They lay there for a moment in the quiet safety of the bunker. Outside, the world was dangerous. There were traitors, mercenaries, and a secret society hunting them. But in here, wrapped in each other's arms, there was a strange, terrifying peace. Jane traced the line of his jaw with her finger. We are going to win this, aren't we? Make kissed her forehead, a lingering, possessive kiss. We have to, because if we don't... He tightened his grip on her. I am going to burn this entire city to the ground. No one takes what is mine. Jane looked at the monitors. She saw Maria in the kitchen, typing the message that would start the trap. She is packing. She is leaving in 1 hour. The lie was sent. The game was on. Jane closed her eyes and listened to her husband's heartbeat. It was strong, steady, the heartbeat of a monster, and she loved every rhythm of it. The library of the Moretti estate had seen many things: secret deals, silent murders, and brooding loneliness. But tonight, it was a theater stage. I hate you, Jane screamed, picking up a crystal vase and hurling it against the wall. It shattered with a spectacular crash, sending shards of glass skittering across the floor. I am not raising my daughter in a war zone, Make. I'm leaving. Make sat in the leather armchair, gripping the armrests. His face was pale from blood loss, but his eyes were sharp, watching her performance with intense focus. He didn't yell back. His part was the cold, silent tyrant. "Go then," he growled, his voice low enough to sound menacing, but loud enough to be picked up by any listening device Maria might have planted. "Take the car, take the money, but if you walk out that door, you never come back." "Watch me," Jane spat. She grabbed a suitcase she had hastily packed with random clothes. She stormed out of the room, slamming the heavy oak door so hard the frame rattled. In the hallway, she paused, her chest heaving. She looked at Maria, who was standing by the front door, weeping real tears. "Tell them I'm coming," Jane whispered to the housekeeper, gripping her arm. "Do it now." Maria nodded frantically, her hands shaking as she typed on her phone. "She is leaving, black SUV, heading to the airport, alone." Jane walked out into the cool night air. The black armored SUV was waiting, engine idling. Luca stood by the driver's door. He opened the back door for her. Jane leaned in, pretending to secure a car seat. "Give them hell, Luca," she whispered to the empty back seat. Inside the car, 3 heavily armed tactical officers were crouched on the floorboards, invisible through the tinted glass. "With pleasure, Mrs. Moretti," one of them whispered back. Jane slammed the door. She stepped back. Luca nodded to her, got into the driver's seat, and peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying. The tail lights disappeared into the fog. Jane didn't move. She stood on the driveway, alone in the silence. Then, she turned and walked back into the house. The front door clicked shut, the lock engaged. The trap was set. The symphony of chaos. Back in the command center, the basement, Make had moved from the panic room to the main desk. He was hooked up to an IV drip of fluids, refusing to rest until the night was over. Jane walked in and stood beside him. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was clammy but strong. "They took the bait," Make said, pointing to the main screen. A GPS dot representing the SUV was moving down the highway. "Intercept team is waiting at the bridge." "And the signal?" Jane asked, looking at a second monitor. "Triangulated," Make said, a predator's smile touching his lips. Maria's phone pinged a tower in the industrial district. An abandoned textile factory. That's where the handler is. That's where Paolo is. "Team Bravo is in position," a voice crackled over the radio. "Execute," Make ordered. On the main screen, the drama unfolded like a silent movie. The SUV reached the bridge. Suddenly, 2 vans boxed it in. Men jumped out, weapons drawn, expecting to drag a screaming woman out of the car. Instead, the SUV's doors flew open. Flashbangs were thrown. White light blinded the camera feed for a second. When the image returned, it was chaos. The ambushers were being ambushed. The Moretti tactical team moved with lethal efficiency. But Jane wasn't watching the bridge. She was watching the second screen. Team Bravo had breached the factory. The camera feed from a soldier's helmet showed dark corridors, rusted machinery, and then a door kicked down. A man, the handler, was sitting at a desk with a laptop. He looked up, shock registering on his face too late. He reached for a gun. He didn't make it. Team Bravo swarmed him. "Target secured," the radio crackled. "The boy is safe. I repeat, the boy is safe." Jane let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 4 years. She slumped against Make's shoulder. "We did it." Make didn't relax. Not yet. He keyed the mic. Put the handler on. There was a pause, then the sound of shuffling. "This is Alessandro Moretti," Make said into the microphone, his voice echoing in the basement and miles away in the factory. "You threatened my daughter. You turned my staff. You tried to kill me." The handler laughed, a distorted sound over the radio. "The circle is infinite, Moretti. Cut off one head, and I will burn the rest of the body," Make finished coldly. "You are going to give me every name, every safe house, every bank account, or I will let my wife decide what happens to you. And trust me, she is much less forgiving than I am." He cut the connection. He looked up at Jane. "It's done," he said. "The circle is broken. Tonight we send a message to the city. The king is back, and the queen is untouchable." The aftermath. The sunrise the next morning was spectacular. It burned away the fog, bathing the estate in gold. Jane sat on the terrace, a cup of coffee in her hand. This time, her hands weren't shaking. Julia was playing on the lawn, chasing a butterfly. 2 new guards stood at the perimeter, but they were distant, unobtrusive. The sliding door opened behind her. Make walked out. He was moving stiffly, leaning slightly on a cane, but he was upright. He wore fresh clothes, a white linen shirt and dark trousers. He looked clean, renewed. He sat down slowly in the chair next to her. "Maria is packing," he said softly. "She wants to leave. She feels ashamed." "She saved us in the end," Jane said, watching Julia run. "She should stay, if she wants to. Paolo needs a home too." Mike looked at her surprised. "You would let a traitor stay?" "I would let a mother stay," Jane corrected. "Loyalty born of gratitude is stronger than loyalty born of fear. If we keep her, she will never betray us again." Make smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. "You are better at this than I am, Jane. You rule with the heart. I rule with the fist. You need both," she said, reaching out to take his hand. "That's why there are 2 thrones." Make turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. He looked at her ring finger. It was bare. She had taken the ring off 4 years ago and left it on the dresser. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the ring. It wasn't the same one. The old one was a diamond. Cold, perfect, sharp. This one was different. It was an antique ruby, deep red like blood, surrounded by small black diamonds. It was darker, heavier, more intense. "I bought this 2 years ago," he confessed, looking at the stone. "I told myself I would give it to you if I ever found you. It represents passion and survival." He looked into her eyes. "I don't want to marry the girl I sent away, Jane. I want to marry the woman who broke my nose in the hallway. I want to marry the partner who planned a war in my basement." He held the ring poised at the tip of her finger. "Will you take the burden? Will you take the danger? Will you take me, broken parts and all?" Jane looked at the ring. Then she looked at Julia, laughing in the sunlight. Then she looked at Make, the man who had loved her enough to let her go, and loved her enough to burn the world to get her back. She didn't hesitate. She extended her finger. "I'm not taking a burden, Make," she whispered, as he slid the ring home. It fit perfectly. "I'm taking my place." Epilogue. 3 months later. The gala of the season was held at the City Opera House. Every major player in the underworld and the legitimate world was there. Judges, politicians, rival crime bosses who had hastily signed peace treaties. They were all waiting. Rumors had been flying for months. The Moretti family had gone dark. Some said Alessandro was dead. Some said he had lost his mind. Then, the doors at the top of the grand staircase opened. Silence fell over the ballroom. Mike Moretti stepped out. He wore a tuxedo that fit like a second skin. He looked healthy, lethal, and more imposing than ever. But no one was looking at him. They were looking at the woman on his arm. Jane wore a gown of deep crimson silk that flowed like liquid fire around her body. Her hair was swept up, revealing the ruby necklace at her throat. She didn't look down. She didn't look nervous. She scanned the crowd with cold, calculating gray eyes. She looked like she owned the building, the people, and the night itself. Make leaned in, whispering in her ear as they began to descend the stairs. "Are you ready, my queen?" Jane smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. "They are staring, Make." "Let them stare," he replied, squeezing her hand against his side. "Let them see what happens when you try to break us." They reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Jane didn't flinch. She squeezed Make's hand back, feeling the warmth of his skin, the anchor of his presence. The war was over. The peace had begun. But if anyone ever dared to threaten her family again, well, Jane knew exactly where the gun was hidden in her purse. And this time, she wouldn't hesitate to use it. She raised her chin. "Shall we dance, husband?" "Forever," Make promised. And as the music started, the king and queen of the city stepped onto the floor, spinning into a future that was dangerous, uncertain, and absolutely, perfectly theirs. The end.